What's up, everybody? This is Brantley from Blejit Choreography. I am here with these two amazing men from G&S Academy, Jonathan and Lance. Welcome to today's call. I would love to just have a quick moment to introduce yourself and then tell us what G&S Academy is.
Hey everyone, my name is Jonathan. I am from New Orleans, Louisiana. The G&S Academy is a 3-day extensive skills training camp. We're here to provide nutrition, skills training, tumbling, stunts, mental training. We're a well-rounded athlete skills camp is what I would say explains us the best.
Hmm, agreed. Hi, guys. My name is Lance, and I live in Huntsville, Alabama. The academy is just what he said, but much more. We offer coaches training as well, parent training classes that you can attend to educate yourself to help better your athletes. Plus, it's some fun times as well, good memories.
I love it. It's always fun to come together in person and to learn and grow as a group. And when are the dates of your G&S Academies going to be for the 26-27 season?
Our Alabama location, which is in Trussville, Alabama, that is June 19th through the 21st. And then we have one in Philadelphia over in Warminster, Pennsylvania, and that is going to be July 31st through August 2nd.
Awesome. I'm super excited. And one thing too is that's really cool is if you can't make it to an in-person experience, we are also offering a coaches accelerator program through Be Legit Choreography on June 6th. That is going to be virtual, and we're going to have our great GNS fellas coming on to talk more about tumbling then. So, all right, well, let's dive in. It is the new season. We have officially ended last season, and
Praise Jesus.
it just keeps on coming, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
So
never ends.
it never ends. Hashtag cheer. So as we are rolling into the next season, we know with tryouts coming up, everybody is really working their hardest to make their team that they want to be on. They're pushing for new skills, they're training their tumbling, they're trying to get ready to make that team. So really want to come together to really help these athletes who are out here working their skills to succeed. And I know, we've all been in the cheer industry for quite some time and, have succeeded on all these different levels. So we're coming together here to help you athletes to address what some of the main issues are when it comes to tumbling and what we know as instructors to help you kind of expedite your process in your learning, but also to do things in a safe way and to come out on top feeling confident about yourself. So let's just start with what the biggest issue is that you all see when it comes to training athletes, cheer athletes with their tumbling.
I would say personally, doing more outside of the gym, not rushing into things. Most athletes, right? Everyone wants to get the next biggest thing and be the next social media star. Just enjoy the journey, take your time, and just love what you do. Enjoy tumbling. Don't make it like a job.
Mm, so true.
Yeah, yeah, definitely take the time to one recovery when we're practicing so much. I mean, if you think about it, now that tryout season's in full swing, people are in the gym a little bit more than normal. And as a young athlete, they got to make sure that they're giving their bodies time to recover because it's not just knowledge of the skill, but the conditioning of their bodies and the strength of their bodies. And, that constant breakdown could affect getting a skill or could cause insecurity, as I call it, in throwing certain skills. So,
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like this alone encompasses so many different aspects of tumbling. And,
mhm.
when we think about it, athletes at this point in the season, they're in the gym, they're signing up for all the private lessons to get those tumbling skills to make
Hmm.
that team. And as we close out a season, I think your point about resting is so important because cheerleading, competitive cheerleading really is a full year long sport with about 2 weeks off in the end of May
If that.
and and maybe during the Christmas holiday season, the winter holidays. So, resting, mental resting, giving yourself some closure. That's such a good point that you guys made. And then Jonathan, you mentioned doing more outside of the gym, right? Let's dive deeper into that. What would you say? Because like at the end of the day, tumbling is an individual skill, right? So with the pressure of getting on a team and training and training and training to make tryouts happen, what could athletes be doing not only for their mental health, but their physical health outside of the gym to even prepare them to be more efficient when they're in the gym?
Yeah. I always tell athletes there's three things that typically stop you from getting a skill. It's either a technique issue, it's a strength issue, or it's a flexibility issue. Obviously, throwing the skill over and over and over again, they think like, oh, I just can't do it. They just don't think of like the strength or the flexibility side. Obviously, taking time to just have an off day. Don't train, don't do anything. That's your mental break. You press your reset button, go have fun with friends. And then just, again, you don't have to do, I'm not saying you got to go hardcore and join a military boot camp. But like, again, like go join a fitness class, go do a yoga class, anything that's going to help you just be more well-rounded, not even in cheer, but it will just help you in general in life.
Absolutely. And when we think about the tumbling skills, you know, I always say tumbling is like a sentence, right? So you have
Mm-hmm.
the full sentence, and what do you need in order to make up that sentence? You need words. And what do you need to make up words? You need letters. And so if
Mm-hmm.
you compare that to tumbling, like a tumbling skill, you need the actual body shapes that make up that tumbling skill. And to make up those body shapes, you actually need the muscles to maintain that shape and flip through time and space to get
Mm-hmm.
it done. So Lance, tell me a little bit more about how athletes might be able to train those shapes on their own, since a lot of times these athletes are coming into the gyms, right? Like, tell me a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
about that.
What we do, especially in our classes, we have shape training. So like it's a warm up. We do our dynamic warm up. A lot of our drills are teaching them the shape. So if it's a handspring class, we're teaching the slight hollow and slight arch shape. When we have them jump onto certain mats, we have to be in that shape. These are all things that they can translate to back home, like whether they're using their bed, like they can use that jump back and land in that shape, or just laying on the floor and holding those shapes, almost like planks and push-ups. But we also reinforce like, hey, this is how we want your back to feel. And I'll give like the younger kids an example, like, the mad cat position, or I want your back to be shaped like a turtle shell when you're in a tuck, or things like that, and also giving them cues on visuals and things like that. So everything that we do in those classes, I'll let them know like, hey, this is something you can do at home, or don't do that at home, do that here. So those are different variations that we try to do. Whether it happens or not, we don't know.
Well, I'm sure you can tell as they're progressing in class if they're putting in that
Yes,
work a little bit more or not, right?
100%.
Okay, so maybe there's people who are watching this video today who haven't had the opportunity to get coached by you all, or even maybe even be coached consistently in general. So let's do
Hmm.
a quick overview for any newbies out there. What are the actual body shapes that are required for tumbling skills? What are like the main few body shapes out there?
Number one is the handstand shape, straight line, head position in the neutral position, which is one of the biggest things you'll always have to correct. Keeping your hips in line with your spine, your shoulders, and using everything stacking on top of each other gives you more strength versus just muscle. That
Okay,
would be
so
the number one.
handstand, number one, is
Mm-hmm.
the most important shape because that seems to be like the foundation of all tumbling,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much, right? Okay,
Yes.
so what are some of the other shapes, you guys? What are some of the things that people should know?
So again, of course, you have your tuck shape, your hollow, you have a tight arch.
Okay, so handstand, neutral line,
Mm-hmm.
hollow, where you're like in that plank position where you're facing downwards and you have that like hollow, almost like an empty tree. You
Correct.
have that
Mm-hmm.
tight arch, which maybe if you were
Mm-hmm.
laying flat on your back and you lifted your hips to the ceiling, that might be tight
Mm-hmm.
arch. Extended into bridge, feet on the floor, hands on the
Mm-hmm.
floor, and a stronger arch. And then, of course, the
Mm-hmm.
tucking position where you're rolling,
Mm-hmm.
forward rolls, back tucks, things of that nature.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we were to say, in terms of these body shapes, though you've already kind of given us some of the drills you might do or some of the ways at home
Mm-hmm.
athletes could actually be perfecting these shapes. Because remember, if that's the foundation of the tumbling skill is those shapes and they need the muscles, Is one time enough working on this at home? What are some things that they can do to make sure they're building the muscles within those shapes at home?
I'd say, yeah, I mean, one time a week definitely isn't enough. Again, the more quality reps that you do is the biggest thing. So, I mean, I always tell athletes, even if you only do 5 reps, just take your time, make sure you're doing it correctly, because good reps are better than bad reps, because then you're just going to train that bad muscle memory. But correct, like being physically strong, but also being able to like maintain the shape. It's like there's a difference between like, hey, I can lift a lot of weight, but can you actually hold this certain position?
Mm. Okay, and so
Definitely.
Lance, give us some practical drills at home for each one of those shapes.
Well, just holding the upright push-up position. You can elevate your feet, making sure your head is in that neutral position. I always have my athletes try to look at their toes so their head is not sticking out, because when our head is out, it does cause a different shape with your upper back, and we want to keep that same shape throughout the skills. Um, Holding, we do like a reverse plank where you can lay down on your back and you do a candlestick and let it come down slowly and try to hold that shape all the way to the floor, hitting that slight arch shape where our butt doesn't touch the ground, but maybe our heels and our shoulders are on the ground. So we're learning to hold that tight shape, which is really big for in your handsprings, your layouts, round offs. I find that one shape is the hardest for kids to hold, and I think it's a missing link for a lot of the tumbling that we see.
Awesome. Okay. So we're talking about the fact that tryouts are coming up, the new season. And I think one thing coaches experience a lot is that there's this huge rush to get new skills to make a team. And
Mm,
we're talking about, okay, look, it's not all going to happen in the gym. You got to do some training at home. Let's start with the foundation. But when we're feeling the pressure and often, I mean, like, let's be honest. I mean, I love working out and going to the gym, but if I have a coach that's going to be there that I paid money to go see, I'm probably going to show up. I'm probably going to work a
hmm
little bit harder. So it sounds like the first thing here that we want to help athletes with is like recognize tumbling's an individual skill. It's all
hmm
about what you put in is what you're going to get out, those quality reps, and honing it in at the foundational level about shapes. Okay, so let's say everyone applies that, but we still feel this pressure of rushing to get new skills. What do you see as the problem with rushing to get new skills to make a team?
I would say, and I always tell kids, I'm like, there's a difference between having a skill and competing a skill. I'm like, everyone's like, oh, like I got to get my tuck for tryouts. That's like just the bare minimum just to even be considered for the team. No way
hmm
I always ask them, like, look, do you want to be in the routine or do you want to be on the team? Because there's
Mm,
a difference. I know everyone wants to try and hurry up and, get to level 3 and get to level 4. But like, if you truly think about it right, you can be a star in, the lower level and be in stunts, be in tumbling, have those highlight moments. Or you could be on the higher level team to say that you're on it, then you're not even in the tumbling, so now you're hindering yourself later on.
such a good point. What about you, Lance? What do you think?
I think it's when they're rushing. I mean, yeah, we have some athletes that can get those skills, but I also let them know like you should have been training this skill 4 or 5 months ago. So that way you're in the position to be in the routine, not stressed out and leading to injury or mental block where they've fallen and now they're freaked out because they weren't confident enough to do the skill and now they fell down and it scared them and now it's going to set them back. So just taking the time to learn those skills and do it right from the beginning is going to help them in the long run, is how I feel.
Absolutely. And, to your point about, probably should have started training this skill 4 or 5 months ago. I think one thing
hmm
I remember seeing in the gym a lot was, these athletes actually weren't ready to start training 4 or 5 months ago. But
hmm
now they're feeling this pressure to make a
hmm
team. And I think your point is exactly right. Like it leads to mental blocks, it leads to fear, a lack of confidence, comparison. But I think another component that athletes are facing is the pressure from their parents to make that team. Can you guys talk a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit about that and how you see that playing out?
Yeah. I have a lot of super young athletes that are way past their time when it comes to skills, but I find that they lock up or get very emotional when they can't throw the skill that they did the week before 100 times. And it's just because they're being pressured into pushing. Like we want to be on that level 3 team, but we've been on a level 2 team for 4 years. I mean, sometimes I have to talk to the parent. I'm like, look, they're only 8. We're not going to be on a world's team for a very long time. Let them enjoy it and not have that pressure, because that does lead to burnout, more issues during practice. And like, it feels like we're having to have a therapy session every practice with the child, because all they think about is being pushed. I have to have this skill, or I have to do this, you know. And I like the drive, but at the same time, I feel like that hinders the athlete from, one, having fun, two, from really reaching higher goals in a safe amount of time.
Absolutely. Jonathan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I've actually had an incident where, like, again, a girl, she was having some confidence issues. Finally, threw it again for the first time. She's like, "Oh yeah, like I want to go tell my mom." Ran and told mom, and mom was like, "Oh, you've already done that before." And like, so like,
Mm,
mom, come on, like we were like, we finally broke through it. Like this is a good thing. I know it's hard at times. Got to have those morale boosts. And like, yes,
mm,
sometimes it's tough. You have those kids who are like, oh, like, if their parent is in the parent lobby, like they're constantly looking, to get their, I guess, approval, or to make sure, they don't look disappointed and things like that.
Absolutely.
mm-hmm,
So, I know one thing I would hear too is like on the car ride home, the parent was saying, well, why aren't you doing this? Why can't you get this? We need you to be on this team. And I feel like sometimes that comes from, parents feeling like if their athlete isn't succeeding, that it's a reflection on them as a parent and on their child. And, let's be honest. I mean, with cheer being such a popular
mm-hmm,
performative style sport. I mean, you see there's on social media, especially nowadays, there's these cheer celebrities and these athletes that have rose to fame through their skill, through their look, and there is pressure for parents to want the best for their kid and to want to see
mm-hmm,
their kid grow up and become that. But, you know, I also think there's a lack of awareness. I mean, let's be honest. When we say cheerleading, a lot of people out there still think, NFL dancers or right,
oh
like
yeah,
right, or rah 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 sis boom ba on the sideline. And Lance, when you're saying you're witnessing this with a lot of the younger kids, it's to me, I
mm-hmm,
feel like there's a lack of awareness from parents on how to even be a parent to an athlete who's I mean, like, let's be honest. When you're walking down the aisle in Target, do you see people flipping down the aisle? It's
mm-hmm,
like, no, we're doing superhuman things, and this child is
mm-hmm.
8, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so in your academy, I know you mentioned, and I know today's call is focused on the athletes, and we're going to stay there, but I think it's important. Let's touch briefly upon, some of the things that you teach parents in your training to help also give insight to these athletes that, hey,
mm-hmm.
maybe I can communicate with my parent in a different way and help them understand. So what tips do you guys have for parents and athletes regarding that?
Biggest thing I try to talk to the parent is, if a kid's struggling with a skill or wants to, get that next skill to move up to level, I ask them not to be so rewarding for that skill, but more rewarding for the time they put in to work for it. Like whether it was a hard practice or a hard private lesson, or if it was a good one because they threw more of the skills that they've been struggling on that will get them to that. Like if they have a block on, they got a standing handspring, but they're scared to throw that round off handspring. I'm like, look, let's praise them for throwing it, even if it's on the tumble track or if it's on the mat or something. Let's focus on them getting past this block or improving on those little things versus praising them for the big picture. Because that's good. That's like the icing on the cake. Let's talk about the stuff in the middle. And I also ask the parents, like, look, I mean, you're going to do what's best for your child, but let's talk about other things in the practice, not the skills. Like if she had a hard practice, give her time to open up to you or him, whoever it is, and then they'll communicate with me and say, hey, this is what's going on. I'm like, great, let's figure out what we can do to make sure she comes in the gym, not stressing about trying to throw that skill. And I try to do that. Like I'll approach it when I'm coaching the kid. If they're just not doing it, I'm like, all right, let's go do something different. Let's work on a different skill. Let's work on a different approach. Let's not worry about it right now. And then I'll ease back into that direction because I want them to know that all this is the same as this, and you don't need to be scared of this. And it's more of like just trying to give them a path to get to that point.
Absolutely. And so this whole conversation really stemmed from rushing skills. And I think
Hmm.
to your point, when there's that extra pressure to one, make a team, and two, please your parent and make them,
Hmm.
proud of you, or, if the parent really wants you to be on that team as well, this all boils back down to what we started the call with, which is the basics, the body shapes, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so, Jonathan, can you tell me a little bit more about how body shapes lead into drills, which lead into skills?
Yeah. So basically a skill, you break it down, you have the beginning, the middle, the end, and there's a shape that you have to hit in each of those parts. A lot of people, sometimes you'll have athletes that are like, oh, like the drill's not helping me. But I'm like, the drill is the skill. You just might not be doing the whole flip, but since you're not flipping, they're like, oh, well, this isn't cool.
Mm.
But so again, it's just learning each part. And I always tell people like it's a domino effect. If your beginning's wrong, that's going to bleed into the middle, which then is going to bleed into the end. So if your legs are bent at the end of your back handspring, it's probably because the beginning or the middle is wrong. Like you're not hitting that shape. So it's basically just understanding what part of the skill that you're actually struggling with. And then that way you can go to your toolbox of shapes like, oh, hey, like, wait, I didn't feel my handstand. I didn't feel that tight arch, or like my legs weren't tucked, or things like that.
Absolutely. That point really makes me think about the environment in which the athletes are learning. And we've talked a little bit about rushing skills because we, one, want to make a team, two, our parents might be pressuring us. But let's talk a little bit more now about the comparison aspect. I mean, like I
Mm.
remember when I was growing up in the gym, there was a couple of us that were really excelling, and we would be a little competitive with one another. Who's going to get their X full today? Who's going to do a kick double today? Right?
Right.
And I mean, I remember being 15 and being at home and being like, "Ah, Katie and Kelly are better than me now." And I just was like, Dad, take me to the gym. And it is emotional, right? And so,
Yeah.
how can we talk to athletes about the comparison aspect when it comes to the feeling the pressure to really get a skill or to breeze through the drills and show I can do it, right? What kind
Hmm.
of tips do you have in terms of that for athletes?
I'd say main thing is like I guess creating that culture. So like
Mhm.
at my gym, I actually do like small group sessions. So like I'm always working with like 3 or 4 kids at a time. And I try and like, put them on the same skill level and stuff like that. I even have sisters who are on the same skill level. And of course, they always fight like who got the skill first and this and that. So like I think I guess it's not really like a secret like trick to doing it. I mean, I tell everyone like, look, everyone's journey is different. Like, look, you learned your full
Hmm.
in 2 weeks, but your sister, might have taken it 2 months, but then she's better at standing. You might be better at running. Everyone has their strength and their weaknesses. So I feel like if you just create that culture from the beginning, then you kind of like nip that in the butt per se. But
I
I
love
mean,
that.
once it starts happening, like once the toxicity gets in there, it's just kind of like it's hard to take it. So like as soon as you shut it down the first time and tell them like, keep motivating them, encourage them. Like when you see one of them struggling, like, hey, look, I always tell them like, look, she looks a little sad today. I'm like, go give her a hug. I'm like, she might not like it, but you know what? It might help. You never know.
I am thinking back to this, you're talking about a culture, right? And as a coach, that is really the responsibility is to create that safe space where all athletes can
Hmm.
learn together. But I think another thing that the youth really respond to, like if I put myself back into that time, as much as it was great to either have my coach's praise or to feel like my coach stood up for me in a way, it always felt even more like cool when my teammates did that, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's ways where, if you're watching this and you're an athlete, you can be that calm, inspiring voice to a friend, be supportive and in return, like, right, like treat others how you want to be treated, right?
Yeah.
And be the leader to create that space and that environment for success. Because at the end of the day, you're all on the same team, right?
Right.
A camp that we did last summer, there was this one athlete, and no matter where she was in the gym, no matter what skill they were doing, you knew who it was because she was screaming, "Let's go! You can do it!" Like, no matter who it was for, it could be a basketball coach,
Yeah.
it could be, well, they might just be jumping on a box. But she was rooting every single person on,
She
and
gonna
like,
do it right though.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was great.
And we're talking about her here today, right? She made
Right.
an
Yeah.
impact.
I mean,
Yeah.
she didn't know these people because it was just one random summer camp. But it
Yeah.
didn't, she was your best supporter, like you knew her your whole life.
That's awesome.
But I also feel like the coaches need to set that standard. Like, we tell them what they do wrong, but then we need to make sure we praise them for the things that they're doing correctly, or even if it wasn't correctly, that you could see the effort. Say,
Yes.
okay, that was a good try. I see you trying to fix that, and just remind them of the correction. And eventually that's going to happen. And I've noticed that like in just my rec tumbling classes, I'll coach and I'm like, okay, that was terrible, but like let's work on this. And then the next time I'm like, okay, you're getting better. And then I'll hear another kid say, oh, that was great, Ava, or da da da. And so it feeds off of our energy. So if we come in with that negative energy and my way's the highway kind of big boss thing, then that's gonna translate into those kids being competitive and towards each other, not with each other.
Yes.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's called cheerleading, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's such a huge leadership component to all of this. So, and I love your point that it starts at the top because it is modeled behavior. And
Hmm.
to your point, Lance, about the big boss energy, I mean, I've had some coaches like that in my past. And to me, I did never feel like I was on the receiving end all the time from that. So it didn't really
Hmm.
affect me, but I noticed how it affected some of my teammates. And,
Right.
you know, when I started judging like 10 years ago, I remember being so nervous, right? Like
Hmm.
all these other people kind of seem to know what's going on, and you're just thrown into it and it's go, and you're on the clock. Like it's just you better get it
Yeah.
right and move. And I remember experiencing that and thinking to myself, I was able to lead a judge's stand. I would make sure that the environment there was one of support and not
Hmm.
fear, because let's be honest, people do better work when they're happy, supported, and not in
Hmm.
fear, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about fear a little bit.
Okay.
And we touched upon mental blocks, and I think we can go deeper there. Like, you know, tumbling is scary, right? Like for most
Mm.
people, flipping and not being able to see where your body's going is scary. And that's back to the point about the drills and the body shapes and progressions, proper
Right.
progressions. So when athletes are facing fear, what should they do to overcome that?
I actually have quite a few mental block athletes that I work with, high school kids, all-star kids. Biggest thing I always, I guess, kind of start with is like just figuring out like what really makes them nervous. And like I'll even say like some kids, I'm like, are you really scared or are you just nervous? And like they kind of think about it, they're like, I'm like, because like fear is like, hey, like, oh my God, like I'm terrified, like I can't throw that. But I'm like, or do you just get a little nervous when you do it? And then when they start thinking that, I'm like, look, like you're in control of your nerves. I'm like, you determine like how fast you want to go, how slow. Like you're in control of what's going on. And then like just giving them a path of like, hey, we understand what the problem is. Now, how are we going to get there to like help us overcome that problem? To where
Hmm.
like some mental block kids are just like, well, can you just keep spotting me over and over and over? But I'm like, that's not helping you get through it because like you're just relying on like us to do the work.
Mm. That's such a good point. Relying on the coach to do the work through repetitive spotting, but there's also to kind of tie back to the strength aspect of things. A lot of times we see athletes, taking like 16 steps into a standing tumbling pass, or right,
Ah.
or running clear across the floor for a round off back
Mm.
handspring full, and
Hmm.
they're really valuing the momentum and the
Yes.
power versus the technique. Can you guys talk a little bit about that concept?
There's this, like you said, the last thing is lack of technique. So now they're trying to use power and speed to correct things. when it could be so much easier and so much more beautiful to watch if they would take the time to hit their angles correctly, you know, having their eyes open, looking in the correct spots as they take off or as they're landing, instead of just, I'm on here and I'm hoping I get to my feet. Nope, there's the ground. Thank God. You know, like you see some of that, and then you see the technical aspect of some tumbling, who maybe an athlete's not as strong, but their technique is so good. Like you wouldn't know that because they're standing up, they're just as tall, the shapes are correct, the landings are softer and safer. So it goes back to the technique and understanding, you know, your angles of approach.
Yep. I even tell athletes speed and power, two different things. Yes, they help each other, but I'm like, you have to know like when you need more of one or the other compared to where you're just sprinting for your life. I'm like, that's not power. Because you're just literally relying on you sprinting to use that momentum to get yourself up.
Mm.
I always find it funny when you see like an athlete run really fast, and as soon as they hit their round off, they slow way down, right?
Yep.
Right. And so it's the fear. It's the fear
Yeah.
component. It's the chuck it and pray
Yes.
versus going back into the foundation, the technique. Lance, you brought up the word angles. And
Hmm.
I think to some people who may not know what that means, I'll give like a quick example and we can dive deeper. But,
Of course.
you know, tumbling is so tied to physics, right? And
Mm.
the power, the shape, the strength to maintain the shape. And like, for example, when I grew up in cheer, we started for the first half of my career was on dead mat. But
Mm.
then by the time I'm throwing doubles on dead mat, it's time to throw them on spring floor. And I'm landing on my back, like over rotating,
Over rotating. Yeah.
Arabian to my face, right? So I had to relearn my, you're like, yeah, me too, right? Like, it's like, oh my gosh, it still lives in my head. But, you know, the changing of the angles comes back to the physics of the skills. And
Hmm.
so can you elaborate a little bit more on what angles mean and how the physics of tumbling plays out?
Well, angles are everything for connective tumbling. For instance, a round off handspring, you don't want to land a round off with your feet behind you because that's going to make your handspring go too high or undercut. Yep. So if we're going this way and our feet land here, our handspring's going this way, not where we want it to. But if we land it under or slightly in front, we're still standing up straight. The rebound's still the same, but now our angle is different. So now it's going to help us carry that skill where we want it to. Like, because we want long tumbling for connected floor tumbling. And then we want very high tumbling for non-connective tumbling, with the exception of a few skills here and there. Of course, they're different, but it makes it easier to use that momentum and power all together to tie in to give them a safer launch, an easier way to spot the ground, and a safer landing as well.
Absolutely. Jonathan, you have anything you want to add into that?
Agreed. I always tell some athletes, which actually a good friend, he uses it and I kind of stole it. Red light, green light, yellow light. And he's like,
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, like, when you're coming out of your round off or something, you want to go faster. So like, boom, toes in front, that's your green light. Like, hey, I'm trying to go quick. And then of course, when you're trying to go up, like, hey, you want to stop all that speed. What do? Hit the brake. So I'm like, all right, now that negative angle would be your red light. And then like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to stick it or things like that, boom, your yellow light, we're slowing it all down just to kind of help them understand it because I always tell them like, yes, tell me it's like science and math. And they're like, oh, I hate that. I'm like, I know. But like, at least it kind of gives them something like to relate to where like, oh, hey, like that makes sense. Like I'm trying to go back more. Okay. I want to get those feet in front or whatever angle you're trying to hit at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think when it comes to like we're all of these components that we're talking about, they all really layer in together. And so, thinking to, an athlete who might be experiencing a growth spurt, like between seventh and eighth grade, I grew like 6 inches. I have the
Yeah.
stretch marks to prove it. And I had to like relearn my tumbling. And luckily, I had coaches and parents who communicated, who understood that, who took a healthy approach to that. And I was like a little tiny twig with like little roller stick arms that you could just break. But I had a lot of power and I didn't know how to control that power. And then
Mm-hmm.
once we learned angles, and I love that red light, green light, yellow light, metaphor because it really helped me to understand that it's angles, it's strength, and it's controlling your power.
Yes.
I think if we tie back into the fear aspect of things, I was just always afraid of like overgoing, right? Like I wasn't afraid I was going to splat down on my face and land short and break my ankles off. I was afraid of flipping too much, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing I've kind of noticed when I'm working with athletes is first and foremost, like helping them connect the concept, like Lance, what you were saying, connective tumbling versus like the high flying skills. When we talk to the athletes and they're so focused on getting the round off back handspring so I can be on level two, like I always ask them, well, okay, what's the purpose of a round off? And they're like, it's a round off. And so it's you can see there's a disconnect, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So could you guys tell me a little bit more about that concept of connective skills and the purpose? Like, what is the purpose of a round off?
Yeah, I mean, I always, and like that's where I guess like some athletes kind of like going back to like the foundation and the basics. I'm constantly training round off handsprings. You can never train your round offs enough because, right, it's literally the most important skill. But as far as like connective skills, I'm like, yes, look, you got your round off handspring, but that is basically like the foundation to your future from this point on. So I'm like, okay, yes, we landed it, but I'm like, okay, like, hey, is the power there? What does it look like? I'm like, are we just trying to get a back handspring or are we trying to be on that world scene 5 years from now? Because right now determines the route that we're taking to get there. Everyone's right, just so quick to do it. And I'm like, oh, look, that's great. All right, now we have to try and make it better. And, sometimes they just don't want to take that extra approach. But like, right, your round off literally is the foundation. I'm like, it's the structure of your house. I'm like, you wouldn't build a house with, paper sticks. I'm like, if you have this bad round off, there, that's it. It's crumbling, and then you're already leading it from that point on.
I always tell them, like, once I ask that question, I'm like, okay, what are you trying to connect out of the round off? They're like, well, back handspring. And I'm like, so what direction do you need to be facing to do that? Backwards? Oh, okay. So the round off gets you facing backwards with power in that right position to connect the handspring. Okay, so what's the purpose of a back handspring? Now they're thinking, oh, it's to get more power backwards to do the big skill. I'm like, exactly. So now we understand why these skills exist and what they really are. It's not, because in cheerleading, everything's about stick landing, stand, and like perform.
Right.
But when you're training, it's like we rebound and we train the skills, right? So I think helping them switch that in their brain to understanding how it works and why it works, it helps them to value the skill, the drill, and the shape. And then that in
100%.
turn brings their mental level up to not be so afraid and to understand it.
It just goes back to the basics. The stronger the round off, the better the handspring. The better the handspring, the bigger the skill could be, or the easier the last skill is. And it's the same thing for like level one skills. The stronger that is, the stronger your level twos are going to become because now you're learning your body control, how to squeeze. So it's all about just going back down to those basics and perfecting your basics because then that makes the bigger, harder looking skills really not that hard if you have a good base. So,
Awesome. All right. So we've talked a lot about, the need to feel like we've got to get skills to be on a team. And we've trained and, we've talked about valuing the foundation. So let's say now we're in the midst of the season. You got the skills, you made the team. How are we maintaining our ability to perform that in a routine full out? Let's be honest, cheerleading is a special sport, okay?
it is.
It's not like you're playing soccer, you're running down the field and smiling to the crowd at the same time, right?
Not at all.
So let's talk about that aspect of tumbling as a cheerleader, right? Because it is different than gymnastics. So tell me a little bit more about how you translate training tumbling skills into a competitive cheerleading routine.
One, my biggest thing I always tell athletes, I'm like, pay attention to your warm up. That's where most, bad habits get created. That's when, things start happening. I'm like, whenever you're warming up, I'm doing this lazy round off hamstring. You should always be warming it up like you're about to do a double full. That way, again, when you're in the routine, you're not thinking, oh, wait, I got to fix this. I got to think of that. The muscle memory is there. You already know what to do. And I feel like that's where a lot of athletes, they just kind of take advantage of the warm up. But I'm like, the way you warm up is the way you're going to compete. Because when you go to competition, you only get that 1 or 2 passes that you get on the warm up floor, and then boom, you got to go make it happen on the competition floor. So I think like if you're, I guess like training that and really starting it from like the beginning, it's going to start, bleeding into the competition side of things. And then again, I would say making things harder in a way. So like if you have a tuck, okay, now we're going to train our tuck to make it higher, like up onto a stacked or raised surface. A lot of people are just like, oh, hey, well, they can land the tuck. All right, let's go do the layout now. But I'm like, okay, but like you're not actually training the skill for the competition. And that's when it's, do you have the skill, or can you actually compete and like own the skill per se?
Absolutely.
I go back to the year-round process. Like the first 3, maybe even 4 months, you're training to build strength, power, conditioning. And then once you get into pre-competition season, you're perfecting and keeping that skill that you've been working on. And then it's more of a finesse throughout the rest of the season. So that way you're putting more attention on other things and you're not losing skills because you're not so focused on it. And then of course, you get your reps in with your practices and things like that. So it's a balance throughout the whole year is how I feel about it.
So at the core, you need to have the integrity in yourself to always do your best to push the skill to its fullest strength and accuracy, and then recognize that there's a seasonal flow to the sport where you need to transition from training season to training it in a routine for stamina, because you're stunting, you're jumping, you're performing, you're dancing, and you're flipping your body over multiple times in 2.5 minutes. So that's where that mental strength and that willingness to give it all it takes to complete the skill safely when you are tired. And I think there's another thing that's like a little bit of an interesting layer that is unique to competitive cheerleading, which is synchronization, right? And especially when, you've got a shorter person and a taller person who have to synchronize, when you have music that you have to hit the beats on, and you're being judged on your timing. So how can athletes recognize this and actually honestly take the initiative to perfect their timing on their own? If we were able to give them insight, what do you need to do if you're the shorter person? What do you need to do if you're the taller person? How does that change your angles in your training? Because let's be honest, like it might not be perfect once you put it in the routine for what your body type should be doing. Can you guys talk a little bit about that?
I think it really boils down to you give them counts for when everything should be hitting and going and when your hands should be blocking. I don't think the length or the angles should ever change according to their height, because then you're going to start compromising those shapes. And I get it. There are extreme versions where we had one girl that's almost, 5'9", and this one's 5'4". Like it's a big difference in their reach. And but just giving them the counts so they'll learn to either speed up or slow down just a little bit just to accommodate that, but never sacrifice the angles or the shape of the skills. Yeah.
So I hear like some coaches say like, oh, hey, like go slower or like make your tumbling shorter. And I'm like, no, I'm like, we don't want to do that because then you're just going to cause more problems later on. You got to just learn to like give them a different count to where like it does kind of match up, or give them those cues that actually help fix the problem rather than just like, I guess, hurting them per se just to make it look on time.
So if we were to go nitty gritty, and I agree, right? Like, and that is the approach that I think most coaches take, because when you're in a practice setting with a full team and one person's always slow or one person's always fast, it's just easier to say, slow down or go faster, right? And I agree, like the angle shouldn't change because that's health, that's true technique, and that's what's getting them where they're supposed to go with the higher level skills. So like my mind goes like for example, if we're talking about like a level 3 standing tumbling pass, triple back handspring, and you've got this one taller athlete that's matured all of a sudden and she's relearning her angles, and what might be a good suggestion that isn't about changing her angles, or maybe she's not executing her angle right. Like the first thing that comes to my mind in a standing back handspring is how many people drop their chest to start and how that slows down the pass. So if an athlete is experiencing that and their coach constantly just tells them, go faster, what would
Now they're
you
gonna
give
fling it and mess it up even more. Yeah. You gotta have a unified version of how they swing, how they sit. I teach, we should be keeping our sight forward when we sit for a back handspring, keeping that chest up, hinging at the hips. So that way we're staying over our toes so we can be more explosive going into the skill versus where a kid drops their chest and then all their momentum is gonna be flinging back, and that causes that undercut rotation because now they're throwing their hips forward instead of up. So it's just a combination of a lot of little detailed oriented that you have to look at when it comes to things like that.
We talked a bit about comparison in this
Hmm.
conversation. And I think that's one thing for us to like recognize. Cheerleading is really cool too. There's so many, everybody should be a competitive cheerleader. But it's so cool too because this is one sport where almost truly every body type can participate. There
Yes.
is a
Hmm.
position for you. And when we're looking at that, how might we adjust and look? Like, for example, with my same example of this person who had a growth spurt, they're slower at tumbling, oftentimes we see like if you look at gymnastics, the Olympics, 2008, Nastia Lukin versus Shawn Johnson. Very tall, flexible, very short and powerful. They're two completely different body types, but also both are winning gold at the Olympics, right?
Hmm.
So there's a correct way to do the skills for each tumbling body type, but also some skills may work better for one body type than another.
Hmm.
So I think for athletes who are listening, who are identifying with this, looking at how your body is shaped and understanding, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses?
Yes.
Maybe that tall person is slower at shoulder block in their handstand snap down for back handspring. And their detail specific training for them might need to be handstands against the wall, shoulder shrugs, handstand snap down drills, planks, versus somebody who's shorter and has that more power might need to work on length and elongating their jump and things of that nature, right?
Hmm.
So it's fun though. It's cool to see how nuanced everything can be.
People do like classes and drills and stuff. And I'm like, you have to make sure that drills are obviously like, have a point to them. Like, like some people just give the same kid the same thing or whatever, but I'm like, each kid struggles in a certain area. So like you have to identify right what that problem is. That way you're actually helping them and you're not just giving them like busy work, which actually isn't even like changing anything that you're trying to fix with them.
Exactly. And that all ties back to what you said earlier about, the integrity within yourself, the culture that's being set, right?
Yes.
It all goes together and it's a beautiful thing. Okay, so we've laid some solid foundations. We've gone into how tumbling translates into a competitive cheer routine. Now, let's talk a little bit more about, elite skills, right? Um, not everybody wants this, but I think it is the goal is to be the best that you can be in this skill, and that means you're progressing to elite skills. So, when athletes are learning their foundational skills, we've already addressed that shapes, muscle strength, mental toughness through drills, building confidence to perform those skills. For any athlete out there who may be at like a back tuck or a layout in their current path and they're looking to get higher level skills to maybe make that world's team and start twisting or bounding, no hand, all of these types of things, what would be your biggest tip for them to get beyond that foundational skill? Because really and truly, layout is still a foundational skill, right?
Hmm.
So, what would be your tips and suggestions to help them cross that bridge?
I would say when it comes to spinning and stuff, I mean, and that's like the good thing about drills is it does break down the skill. It's never like too early to start twisting. I mean, you can start spinning when you're in a level one class. Jump up, spin in a circle, like recognize where you are. The better like, air awareness that you can teach athletes and learn like from a younger age is only going to benefit you later on. And I feel like that's one thing that I guess a lot don't really focus on. They wait until they get to the time to start working on spinning and then the athlete doesn't even know where they are to that point. So now you're trying to teach them the full and air awareness all at the same time.
Good tip.
Mhm. I feel like teaching fulls, if you have a strong layout, it's not very difficult because you can break it down to, flipping and landing on soft surfaces, not even just landing on your feet. You can teach them when to initiate the spin. You can teach them, how this is where you should be looking as you're landing. And you can break it down so many different ways. But what if you don't have that strong foundation, then that makes it even more difficult and even more dangerous for the coach and the athlete. So if you're a spotting coach, there's a lot of elbows that come around, or you might land in a weird position, or they come flying into you. So like, it's just about building that foundation up. And I know we're doing full circle back to the basics, but the stronger the core, the stronger the athlete is overall, the better they can hold those shapes, the easier it is to teach them, the next level.
Yeah. It's funny because I actually have a lot of athletes that are like, oh, well, layouts are harder than fulls. Can I just do the full? And I'm like, oh, like a true good layout, don't get me wrong. Yes, it's hard, but I'm like, better your layout, the easier the full. It's like they always get mad at me when I'm like, do more layouts, do more layouts. They're like, but why? I'm like, because you're working on your full, you just don't know it yet.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think that's a good point. A lot of times athletes don't understand the progression and the fact that you actually are working on that skill without even throwing that skill.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. If we were to touch a little bit more about like the comparison aspect of elite skills, I think it's a double-edged sword, right? When I was young, my parents split up when I was young. I couldn't really afford to be on the travel team that got to go to NCA in Dallas and, but I had a full when I was 9, but I was on the novice team. And, so the owner of the gym would bring back the VHS tapes. I'm really dating myself here. Um, but she would bring back the VHS tapes and I would just watch them and see what was out there. And I
Yeah.
think having that awareness, right, really helped propel my skills and my inspiration to work.
Yes.
Hmm.
The double-edged sword is always comparing yourself to what's out there and feeling less than. So, how might you help athletes, one, raise their awareness, but two, maintain their confidence within themselves? These are some
That
good
is the ultimate
questions,
question. Yeah, that is the good
huh?
question.
Comparison, like when it comes to like elite skills, like obviously everyone always has like their celebrities, their idols that they look up to, and they're
Hmm.
like, oh, like I have a double, but her double's better. But I'm like, it's you're still doing the same skill and things like that. And like I always try and tell kids like, about like celebrities and all that. I'm like, they're just kids, just like you. I'm like, yes,
Yeah, 100%.
are they on like a bigger team, or is their social media following a little bit higher? Yes, of course. At the end of the day, I'm like, she does the same things in the routine. You jump, she stunts. You're all just human beings. And some kids are always like nervous to go talk to them. And I'm like,
Mhm.
they're just a normal kid like you. You're probably going to talk about the same things. But I feel like that's just where like the social media aspect comes into play, and kids just kind of get like more like, oh, like I don't want to post that because it doesn't look good as hers. But be happy of yourself because you're still doing the same thing.
Hmm.
They don't get to see the mess ups and the struggles that those athletes go through.
Right.
And we have been blessed to be able to see, some very elite athletes at big camps struggle with certain skills and then it would click. But we also got to see their work ethic, which made the difference. They didn't get discouraged, or if they did get upset, they would take a breather and then go right back to it, and was determined to get things correct, whether it was working on the basics. And I've had more elite athletes understand when I say, well, let's go back and do this skill first. And they would understand without me having to explain, because they knew if I can go back and reset doing this and then the next time go do this, then it should work a little bit better, or we can feel the difference and figure out what's going on. So that work ethic is what social media doesn't show. And going back to what Matt Kelly said, we should show more fail videos and, the grind to get to that skill versus just the skill that they just threw. So,
You made a good point when we were talking about the parent aspect about supporting
mhm,
their progress. And I
mhm,
think sometimes when you're in it and you're living it, you don't see your progress. And
right.
that ties back into, Jonathan, to what you said about like they're just people. And somebody had said to me, if somebody else can do it, so can you,
Okay,
right?
exactly.
Mm,
So I love that. Like supporting the process. And then to Lance's point about the work ethic not being seen, I mean, that's something else. If we're celebrating the process and we're celebrating the work ethic, the
Hmm.
integrity, the intention to approaching those skills, that right there, like sometimes I'll be like, that was a world champion. You worked like a world champion today, right?
Hmm.
Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I tell kids all the time, I'm like, look, I don't need you to be perfect. You're going to chase perfection in the sport your entire life and literally never find it. I was like, I
Right.
just need you to do this the best that you in the moment right now. I'm like, and that's it. And I'm
Yeah.
never going to be mad at that.
And something else that just popped into my mind with all of that is your self-talk, right?
Mhm.
Because
Mm.
at the end of the day, it's almost like relying on a spot from a coach or relying on your run for your tumbling pass, like the momentum. Relying on positive affirmations all the time is also not sustainable, right? I
Right.
mean, when you're in that routine and you're standing in the corner alone, you have to throw the pass, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what are we talking in our head? What are some things that, we're saying that are derailing us versus putting us on the right path?
That's kind of like what I go back to athletes that have confidence issues. I'm like, all right, when you're standing there for that 20 seconds, what are you thinking about? And like sometimes they don't even know. They're like, well, I don't know. Like I'm just telling myself go. But I'm like, but are you really telling yourself go? Or are you just not like thinking of all the thoughts that are going through your mind? And
Right.
like going back to being in control. Like I had an athlete, she did like this beautiful round off tuck, went back, did a round off stop. And I told myself I was scared that time. I'm like, but you just did a really good one. Why did you let all of a sudden these nerves come in and think that it was bad now?
Hmm. Yeah. I have a few athletes like that as well, and I have to remind them, like, if you're standing there for a certain amount of time, just walk away for a second, do a dance, jump up and down, do something different. It's not that serious. You've already showed us that you can do this skill perfectly fine. It's just you have those self-doubts, and everyone has it, and that's natural. I mean, that's our human nature. So give yourself a time to separate from that for a second, take a deep breath, and do it. It should be muscle memory at this point, and don't try to think while you're doing it, because our brain can't process the correction fast enough because it takes less than a second to flip. I was like, just breathe, let it happen. I'm
Well, you're
here if I
fine.
need to. This is just ensuring that trust between me and that athlete, but also that athlete with themselves. And that's the ultimate challenge, is getting them to understand, like, falling down is not bad. You know, flipping over and over rotating is not bad. Like, yes, I mean, injury can happen. You can walk off the floor and roll an ankle. I've seen it many times, not even doing a skill, so you have to just teach them that, not everything is going to be the extreme. Like, you got to get past that. And it takes time with that. And you can't just say that and for the athlete to understand that either. So,
Yeah. So athletes, falling is your way to learn. Don't be scared to fall. That's how you
mhm,
know, like, hey, like, all right, I didn't do this. Okay, I know clearly that way is not working. I have to make sure I do this. So instead of
mhm,
looking at it as a bad thing, I'm go for it, learn from it. I'm like, even if it's a bad rep, you still at least learn something rather than not doing anything at all.
I think when I think back to my childhood, I mean, let's talk about it in the context of, before you've ever even done the skill by yourself, right? There's
mhm,
a moment in your life where you've never done it, and then there's a moment when you've done it. And it's a really
mhm,
special moment, right? I remember when I was little and I was training to get my round up by handspring back tuck, I was full out sassafras, ready to go to cheer practice. But every day on the car ride to the gym, I'd be so scared. I would just get really nervous. And my mom, I remember her telling me, like, well, let's just visualize you doing it. And it clicked. Like,
mhm,
when I visualized myself succeeding at it, my
Yeah.
body could feel it happening. And I was like, I can do this today. And then it happened. But when I would stand there in that corner, and I've never really had mental block issues. Once it happened. And I remember feeling like I realized I keep seeing myself getting hurt
mhm.
and failing.
Yes.
And so I think that you guys bringing that awareness when you're coaching and saying that, like, what are you thinking about? What are you feeling and visualizing right now? Are you visualizing death or are you visualizing
Right. I'm like, if I stand here, I'm about to die. Let's go. Like, yeah,
right?
get them all.
Right.
I always tell people, like, and the ones that always have to look behind them,
Yeah.
like, we're the only ones in the gym. If you flip over and the ground is not there, it doesn't matter at that point, does it? They're like, no, it's like the ground will be there. It's not going anywhere. Like, I like to try to make it a fun and joking environment because it does help them relax. Because at the end of the day, this is for fun. One day we're not going to flip again. One day we're not going to stun again, and that's okay. And I try to get that in across their head. Yes, we had that pressure of trying to make it to that world stage, in a certain amount of time, but like a lot of people won't ever get there if they keep going too hard on themselves and not enjoying that journey. So
Well, that's a perfect segue, Lance, for going too hard, right? I mean, let's be honest, tumbling is it wears and tears on you if you aren't maintaining your health, and it can lead to burnout if you're pushing and never getting that mental clarity and cleanse of like
mhm.
positivity. So what would be some ways that athletes could actively avoid injury and prevent it and avoid burnout from the start of their career? What are some key things that if athletes did this right, they could have a longevity in their career?
Consistency with their conditioning and nutrition. Obviously, that does include training as well, but giving yourself a rest time period and not putting all your focus completely in it like it's like you're getting paid to do it. Like, take your time to enjoy it, enjoy the journey, enjoy the falls, enjoy the camaraderie with the people around you who are doing the same struggle as you are, and just enjoying the moment and then celebrating the victories of passing a milestone, of getting a skill or hitting a stunt sequence that you didn't think you were ever going to hit, or whatever it may be. So, but
Yeah.
consistency from the beginning, that's the main thing.
Right. I think like a consistency, especially like even with coaching per se, like again, like how you structure it and run it. I mean, like I've had new kids come in and they look at me, I'm like, what? They're like, you're very like chill and laid back. Like you're not like yelling at me things to do. Like I'm like, I'm not here to yell at you. I'm like, look, we're here to have fun. We're here to tumble. You want me to help
Yeah.
you? Great, let's help. If you ain't feeling it today, that's cool too. Go bounce on the trampoline, have some fun. At the end of the day, right, it's not that serious. And sometimes you just need like you have to be able to go in and train and like again enjoy what you're doing, not feeling like it's a job or like oh like man I had practice yesterday now I got to come in and do these extra reps today. Like if the athlete wants to go in and like and enjoying themselves and the environment, then I feel like that's just going to bleed into the way they are, I guess, progressed and again proper progressions and things like that.
Hmm.
I think one note I might offer in addition to those is, I grew up in competitive cheer and all-star cheer, but when I was in my early 20s, I got the opportunity to coach gymnastics where Michaela Maroney, the Olympic gold medalist, was training while she was in the Olympics. And I learned so much. And I think the difference between the cultures of gymnastics and cheer tumbling and training is the strength aspect and the mobility aspect, right?
100%.
And
Hmm.
those gymnasts, even the young ones that were like 6 years old, were in the gym 5 days a week from 4 to 8 p.m. And not only did we have to hit every event, we had conditioning sections between every event
Mm.
for that specific event. So strength and valuing the drills to make the skills
Yes.
Mhm.
I think would be one. And then the fun version of recovery that I think, Jonathan, you mentioned, like take a yoga class, do something fun.
Right. Do
Like,
something that is getting you there, but that isn't like, oh man, I just got to sit here and stretch. Like
right,
you're like
Mhm.
enjoying it while you're doing it.
right. And I think
Because I'm like, go
also,
do goat yoga. Find a goat. Come on, go have fun.
and I love too the point that you made too, Lance, about, enjoy the camaraderie. We're all putting in the work, we're all sweating and working hard. And being in a group setting in person physically, I think is so important. So I
Yeah.
want to take that opportunity to say, if you've been watching this video and you've been enjoying what the tips that Jonathan and Lance and myself have been offering you through this beautiful conversation, you know, take advantage and learn from us in person, right? sign up for the Academy. We'll make sure that you can scan the QR code and get the link to register. But if you're able to, get in person with amazing coaches like Jonathan and Lance here, because it will make the difference and take you to the next level.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for sharing your insights, your knowledge, your expertise. And it just was a really good conversation. And I know that this is going to help some people out there. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Yes.
Well, we'll see you at the Academy. And until then, keep working hard, keep your chins up, and we're rooting for you.
Yes. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.